Hi everybody, this is Craig Tanner for The Mindful Eye and the Daily Critique. Today's image was submitted by Kel, who's a beginning photographer from Georgia. Kel shot this with a Canon PowerShot, a 5.8mm lens after the conversion for a small size sensor. This is kind of a semi-wide angle shot, somewhere around 30 something millimeters. And the ISO was 100, f-stop was f6.3, shutter speed was 1/50th of a second. In the backstory in question, Kel's main question was how to create more of a feeling of 3D in this image. So let's get right into it here. One of the things that I love about Kel's shot is the simplicity of it. Very, very simple. I get the main subject. It's a beautiful subject, so just photographing it in a very simple way to me has a big impact on me as the viewer. Kel's wanting to get more depth out of the image, but let's talk about some things that she's already done that have either created a great feeling of depth in the image the way that it was submitted, or have created the potential to get even more depth into this image. What do we mean when we talk about depth? Obviously a photograph is a two-dimensional artifact. We have movement on the x-axis, left and right, and the y-axis would be movement up and down. There's a third axis that we call the z-axis, and it's the illusion of being able to move through the photograph, even though we know in a literal sense we can't do that. And so here are some things that Kel's already done to create the illusion of movement on the z-axis. One is quality of light relative to this subject. She has what looks like a very soft, broad light source. She has a subject that is a very short distance or greater distance in some places from the background. And because this is a top light and it's a broad light source, the leaf is getting this beautiful highlight. But then you have anywhere from a subtle drop shadow to a very dramatic drop shadow. The difference between highlight and shadow is one of the things that creates the illusion of form, or being able to move in a three-dimensional way in an image. So the quality of light here is working very well to create a 3D effect. Another thing that Kel's done here is lens choice and camera position. She has a semi-wide angle lens. She's taken a low angle and gets very, very close to part of a long subject. And in photography, the thing that's closest to the lens will appear the biggest. Things that are further away will start to look diminished, and you get literally a vanishing point. And that idea of the vanishing point creates the illusion of three dimensions. Another thing that Kel has done here that creates a feeling of depth is just choosing a subject matter where you have a very simple but dynamic color arrangement. Warm here on the leaf, cool on the background. The difference between warm and cool creates the physical sensation of the warm colors coming towards us as our eyes bulge out, the lens does, to focus on the warm tones, and the cool colors receding as our eye, the lens of our eye bends the other way to focus on the cool tones. And very, very powerful in terms of color depth. The other thing that Kel has done here is by getting very close and shooting at a fairly wide open aperture, she has a shallow depth of field, and a dramatic flow of focus can create the illusion of depth. What do we mean by depth of field? It's taking the area of critical sharpness, and it looks like this somewhere right in here in this image, and then comparing the rest of the image from near to far in terms of implied sharpness to that area of critical sharpness. It's clear to see the foreground is very soft and the background's pretty soft. We're drawn to contrast, so in focus and sharp is high contrast. There's not nearly as much weight, visual weight, on areas that are low contrast, and out of focus is low contrast. And so the difference, or a flow of low visual weight, and high visual weight does the same exact thing to sort of our mind's eye as the idea of highlight and shadow, and warm and cool. All these contrasts that we've just talked about, four very powerful things that you can do if you're wanting to get more of a three-dimensional feeling into your pictures. If we wanted to push this even further, here's some things that I would do in post-production. The very first thing that I'm going to do, you'd have to be willing to change the editorial content. When I look at this image, I love the simplicity of it. This real strong triangle is very high contrast at the top. You could make the case that this is another sort of room, in quotes, in the image, so it pulls us way back to this other space. You could say that that creates depth, but it takes away from the main subject, in my opinion. This is the top of the frame, it's the top left of the frame, it's very high contrast, it's a different idea, and I would want to add depth to the main subject. And to me, this even though it overall in the image creates another space, you could say this really pulls us all the way through the image. It takes away from the depth of the main idea because it competes with it, and I would want to get rid of it. And there's a way to get rid of it where we can add even more depth to the leaf. As much as I like the perspective distortion in the leaf, the vanishing point at the very top of the leaf has diminished the elongation of the line of this real dramatic area of the leaf in here. If we get rid of the top part by making a selection in here and then scaling that up, at one time we'll get rid of this distraction and we'll take the top part of the leaf and we'll elongate the line of it, and that might create more of a feeling of depth and being able to move through the image. And so there's the work that I did. There's before and there is after. The next thing that I did, knowing that diagonal movement creates more of an illusion of depth than lines that parallel the edge of the frame, is I took the leaf and I slightly rotated it in this direction. The reason I chose that direction, the leaf is ever so slightly already moving in that direction. This side of the leaf to me has more visual weight than this side. So if I tilt it this way, this is a very simple subject that's symmetrical in some extent, and I feel like by tilting it that I'll keep it simple and balanced. There'll be more of the leaf over here to pull back against the tilt in this direction. And I just copied the background and rotated it and then painted away the corners. This work has been done rough. It's just to give you the feeling of what it might have been like if Kel would have taken a little bit of an angle to the subject when she took the picture in terms of creating more of a feeling of depth. And then the rest of the layers that I've pulled off here really just have to do with continuing to push the idea of the difference between highlight and shadow and warm and cool, and also the idea of darkening around the edges to contain the eye so that there's more of a feeling of depth on the main subject, the leaf. There's a levels adjustment where I created more of a black point. You can see that if you look at the histogram of what I've done. One of the things that's happened to us in digital photography is we get so concerned with staying within the lines in the histogram that a lot of times we don't have a strong enough black point. And in my opinion, in scenes that have the potential to express a pretty broad range in terms of dynamic range, we really should have some pixels clipped to black on average. And so that's what I've done here. That makes a pretty big difference in terms of depth just all by itself. And I came in and darkened even more using curves, create more of a difference between highlight and shadow. I popped the color out on the leaf just a little bit, and then I came in and I darkened even more. And now that I'm coming back and playing this and looking at that move, I don't like it quite so much. I think I went a little bit far, and I think I killed some of the local contrast. I should have steepened the curve, and it looks like I just pulled down on it. And so I just want to turn that off. I don't like what happened on that layer. Maybe we could just use a little bit of it. Here's where we started, and here's where we ended up. But the thing is, Kel already had created an image that had a lot of depth in it and a lot of potential for depth. There's some other things that I might do once I got to here. I might clone out some of these other high contrast areas to just keep the attention on the leaf. The other thing that I wanted to say at the very end of this is that this image makes me think of creating a series of images. I know from the backstory that this background is at Kel's home, so it's available to her. And I can imagine an ongoing project with leaves. This is such a beautiful background. Same quality of light, and you could do something simple like a triptych, or you could do a whole portfolio of leaves sort of shot from the same angle and the same quality of light using the same background. It'd be a really fun ongoing project. I want to say a big thank you to Kel for submitting the image, and I want to say a big thank you to you for being here on The Mindful Eye. Hope to see you again real soon.